That may be the greatest catch I've ever seen in my life.
Alright guys, this video is going to fall in line with the same video I made a couple weeks ago about making stacks in our fantasy teams, and I want to reiterate, this is so important because most people, when they play fantasy football, they look at it the completely wrong way. They think that, okay, I'm going to go out there, I'm going to get a high floor, and I'm going to draft the players that are going to win me my league, and I'm not necessarily going to think about how I'm specifically constructing my team. I'm just going to take the best players at ADP, and that's going to lead me to getting a successful fantasy team. I'm going to make the playoffs, I'm going to get lucky in the playoffs and win the title. Reality, that's not how you should be playing fantasy. You should not be going out there and drafting Ezekiel Elliott in the first round and saying, oh, I took Zeke in the first round, so let me go out there and get Tony Pollard in the 8th in case Zeke gets injured. I mean, that is pretty much the worst thing you can do in fantasy, and every single person does it. Because the thing is, only 7% of us are going to win our fantasy leagues. 1 out of 12. I think it comes out to 7.5%. So if you're going out there and you're making sure that you have the highest floor possible, there's going to be another team. There's probably going to be 6 or 7 teams in your league that have a higher ceiling than yours. And if one of those teams hits their ceiling, that's going to be the team to win the league. It's not necessarily going to be you, where maybe you drafted James Conner and Le'Veon Bell the year Le'Veon Bell sat out and James Conner won people their leagues. Yeah, that's great, but at the same time, even though you got that league-winning running back with James Conner, your first-round pick was total dust. So you were already put at a major disadvantage, whereas if you went out there and you took a David Johnson and a James Conner, so if you had those two running backs who both hit, that's how you win your league. You don't win your league by hedging bets. I mean, we're not managing hedge funds here. We are going out there and we are trying to make compounding bets with compounding variables. And how we do that is with stacking in fantasy football. So I'm going to try to provide a couple concrete stacks that y'all can go out there and target in fantasy drafts this season, whether that's through trade, whether that's through startup dynasty drafts, or even if this is for redraft in 2020. I think all of these stacks are going to be extremely useful in every format. In today's video, I'm going to talk about the stack Jimmy Garoppolo and George Kittel. I know most people think wide receivers and quarterbacks whenever they hear a stack, but George Kittel is a different breed. George Kittle's a different monster. And I think that this situation, I had marked on really early that I like the values of both these players, and I thought if they each hit, that it was going to really lead to fantasy success in 2020. So I've been going out all offseason. This has been my most owned stack. This has been my most targeted stack. And I was out there listening to Evan Silva. I know if y'all are listening to this, I know y'all know who Evan Silva is. And he went out there and he said that Jimmy Garoppolo and George Kittel was actually his favorite stack of 2020 as well. So that just really increased my confidence. And I'm willing to go out there and put this on record and say, guys, this is something we should be targeting. And let me speak about it in a dynasty context. So first, let me talk about Jimmy Garoppolo, who in my opinion, even without targeting the stack, he's being criminally undervalued in Superflex drafts right now. So Jimmy Garoppolo is currently 28 years old, which, yeah, I mean, he's a little bit older, but quarterbacks' age doesn't really matter. I mean, Jimmy Garoppolo could play for the next 5-10 years, and I mean, it's just nothing to really put a lot of faith in. Really, all you have to look at is job security. And I know a lot of people kind of question Jimmy Garoppolo's job security. They say he's a subpar talent at the quarterback position in the NFL, and I think that it could be made an argument that maybe he has a subpar arm, but if we look at his success in the San Francisco 49ers offense, or even just his success in the NFL in general, I think that most common people and most front offices would actually view Jimmy Garoppolo as a great NFL quarterback, not even an average or above average one. And this speaks into why he is 21-5 currently in the regular season as a quarterback starter. And yes, there are so many things that go into this statistic. It's not necessarily just Jimmy Garoppolo, but it's something that front offices are going to care about. It's something that fan bases are going to care about, and it's going to have Jimmy Garoppolo land a job in the NFL for years to come, even if the San Francisco 49ers decide to move on from him in 2020, which I know sounds completely absurd, but after the 2020 season, he has no dead money left on his contract. So, I mean, it's feasible, but I don't necessarily expect that to happen, especially considering the fact that Jimmy Garoppolo just took them to a Super Bowl appearance. And yes, I know everyone remembers him overthrowing going Emmanuel Sanders, and people try to blame him on the Super Bowl loss. But you have to also realize who's the guy who got them to the Super Bowl, and that is Jimmy Garoppolo. But I'm not here trying to argue about Jimmy Garoppolo's talent. I'm here trying to argue with his fantasy evaluation and why it is too low. So in the last 3 flock drafts, Jimmy Garoppolo has gone as the quarterback 19, 21, 21. So he's going as a consistent low-end QB2 despite having age on his side, despite being projected as an NFL starting quarterback for 3 years, which is all you can really expect from these quarterbacks in this range. I mean, if a guy has job security, that's the guy that you want in your team. And if he has any upside, that's just straight bonus, especially in these Superflex leagues. So let's look at Jimmy Garoppolo's 2019 season, and let's try to project what may be to come in 2020. So in 2019, Jimmy Garoppolo averaged 29 pass attempts a game. He had almost a 70% completion percentage, but the volume just wasn't there. I mean, he only had 250 yards a game, which was good for 1.7 touchdowns a game and 0.8 interceptions a game. And this is 102 passer rating, I mean, which I know a lot of people want to argue with and say it's not necessarily valid, but I think there's something to it and it can't be completely overlooked. And this puts him as the quarterback 8th in 2019 in terms of passer rating. So right up there, consistent with his wins as a starter and consistent with his entire history in the NFL. He's going out there and maybe he's not producing top-end fantasy statistics, but he's going out there and he's being efficient and he's winning his team football games, which is going to be important for his long-term stability to come. Now, if we even look at these statistics, though he didn't get the volume, even though the San Francisco 49ers were the run-heaviest team in 2019, he was still able to be the quarterback 17. So he was still able to finish despite the lowest volume possible, despite the worst game script possible for Jimmy Garoppolo, higher than his ADP is currently at. So why are we drafting him essentially below his floor currently in Dynasty, where even if he just regresses to the mean just a little bit, I mean, this is a guy that we can expect to explode in fantasy value and really provide us with that league-winning potential. And that's what we're going to look at. I mean, we're going to look at the potential. Say the San Francisco 49ers aren't as good in 2020, which is completely possible. I mean, Richard Sherman is another year older. They lost their star defensive tackle. That defense is going to be worse. They're not going to be able to run the ball as much as they did in 2019. It's just historically impossible for you to project the same team that was the run heaviest team in 2019 to go out there and repeat in 2020. We have to project the San Francisco 49ers to throw the ball more because that's really just how math in the NFL works from year to year. So if we go out there and say we're going to give Jimmy Garoppolo 20% more volume. Say he's going to regress to the mean and he's going to be around 18th in the NFL in terms of pass attempts per game, which is still lower than average. I mean, it's right about average, but that's what you have to project with regressing to the mean. Obviously, this is not his full-in top range outcome and it's not his lower range outcome. I think this is a safe medium projection for his volume attempts. And if we give him this projection, he's throwing about 35 pass attempts a game. And if we keep his efficiency the same, which I believe we should not necessarily expect his efficiency to drastically dip, just because he's going to go into 2020 with better weapons than he's ever had in his entire career. So yes, his volume may go up, and I'm not expecting his efficiency to go up as his weapons improve, just because you can't necessarily do that. That's a little reckless. So I'm going to project the efficiency to stay the same. So say we give him 35 pass attempts a game, which is good for 18th in the NFL, at least in terms of 2019. This would put him at 300 yards a game, 2 touchdowns a game, and a little less than 1 interception a game. And I know the one problem with Jimmy Garoppolo in fantasy is he does not rush the ball. And this is why I think he's actually a better super flex draft pick than one quarterback draft pick. I mean, if you're in a one quarterback league, you're pretty much looking straight upside. The floor does not matter whatsoever. You're going out there and you're drafting any quarterback that has above average rushing ability and hoping he can hit his upper percentile outcome in terms of throwing the ball. But regardless, even if Jimmy Garoppolo doesn't rush the ball at all in 2020, this projection still puts him as the quarterback 9. So if you're going to be able to go out there and draft a quarterback that has a high long-term floor at quarterback 21, and he can project to be a low-end QB1 in 2020, I mean, it's all upside at that price. And I think that's why Jimmy Garoppolo is such a fantastic buy, not only in Dynasty, but in redraft as well. So now let's go, and we're going to try to say we are expecting the San Francisco 49ers to throw the ball more. Say we're expecting Jimmy Garoppolo to produce more volume. I mean, if we are making that bet already on our fantasy team, we should be going out there and we should be trying to compound that bet. We should be doubling down because we want to try to get away from our team having a 7 percentile chance of winning the championship, and we want to be pushing that 15% chance. So we are going to double down on all our bets when possible. So if we're right, it really skyrockets in value. And how we are going to double down here is we are going to go out there and confidently draft George Kittle, who is currently 26 years old and was a beast in both 2019 and 2018. And I'll be the first to say I was wrong on George Kittle. Going into 2018 after his rookie season, he was pretty much everyone's favorite tight end sleeper. You listen to any podcast in the Dynasty community, everyone was saying, oh, I love George Kittle. No, I love George Kittle more than you. Yeah, George Kittle's my guy. And I'm over here saying, I mean, I like George Kittle, but why is everyone hyped up on him so much? And I was the guy looking like an idiot. I was the guy who owned no George Kittle, but I'm willing to suck it up. I'm willing to look at the past 2 seasons, understand that George Kittle is the most talented tight end in the NFL, and I'm going to go out there and trade for him while he still has years left in his prime, and he's going to give you an edge at the tight end position that really nobody else can offer, at least with his age profile. So if we look at his most recent season, 2019, he averaged 6 receptions a game, 75 yards a game, and what really didn't allow him to win fantasy leagues on his own, yes, he went and he led a lot of teams to fantasy titles, but he was not necessarily the guy who had a 20% win rate in 2019. It was just because he got extremely unlucky with touchdown variance. I talk about this all the time. Touchdowns are extremely volatile. All you can really project is volume, and the touchdowns are going to be random year to year. So now let's try to identify George Kittle's upper percentile outcome for 2020, especially if we increase this San Francisco 49ers passing volume by 20%, just in fact of them regressing to the mean. Now this would put George Kittle in 2020 at averaging 7.2 receptions, 90 yards, and I mean, I'm not going to put in terms of touchdowns per game. Let's just say total touchdowns to make it easier. Say he gets lucky and he scores 10 total touchdowns in 2020. And I mean, this isn't even too absurd to project, especially if you look at his opportunity. This is a guy that can easily project to score anywhere from 8 to 12 touchdowns. I think 10 touchdowns is definitely not the safest projection, but it's not in the range of outcomes by any means. And if we give him these marks, I mean, he's averaging about 20 points per game in non-tight end premium leagues, and in tight end premium leagues, he's averaging almost 24 points a game. Now, guys, that is just ridiculous. I know it sounds like a lot, but to put into context how much this is, that's over double what the tight end 12 scored last season. So if you're going out there and you're putting one player in George Kittle in your tight end position, and he's going to be doubling your opponent's tight end output, I mean, this is a guy that's going to have an insane win rate if the San Francisco 49ers end up throwing the ball more in 2020, which I think is safe to project. Now, let's talk about the exact price for both of these guys. I mean, in the most recent draft that I was able to complete the stack in, I believe was either the Flock 9 or the Flock 8. Y'all play in a ton of Dynasty Leagues with me. I love getting out there and playing with y'all. And yeah, I mean, y'all see me going out there and taking George Kittle pretty much every single time I get a late round 1 pick. And in this draft, I was actually able to go get George Kittle at the 204. So I took George Kittle at the early of the second round, and in a Superflex league, I got Jimmy Garoppolo at the 709. So this is a completely reasonable price to pay for the stack, especially when it does have league winning potential and is going to be able to really bring home the title if it hits its upper percentile outcome. But thanks, guys. Really hope y'all enjoyed the video. I'm going to bring y'all a couple more of these in the coming days. And yeah, I think this is something that not enough people talk about, and we should really focus in and try to efficiently build our dynasty teams. Yeah, have a great day.
That may be the greatest catch I've ever seen in my life.